Hey guys, hope you're all doing well out there. If you recall, yesterday was our first day in our Civil War unit, and we looked at the different advantages that each side had in the war. Now, I want to kind of start out with a stoppage out here and have you weigh all those things together and then decide overall which side do you think had the biggest advantage going into the war. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and jot your answer down in your social studies notebook. Did the North or the South have more of an overall advantage in the war? Okay, I'm going to assume that you did that, and hopefully you picked the North. That's what I felt like was shown in the reading. You look at this, I kind of just pulled together my own thoughts and opinions from the reading here, and I felt like the North had three clear-cut advantages over the South: economic strength, transportation, and natural resources. Okay, so if you think about it this way, that means the North had access to more resources that they could make things with. They had the money and the factories to actually then go ahead and produce those various supplies, products, weapons, and to produce high quality types of them. And they had the transportation, the railroads and the roads to be able to get them all over the place and get them at quick speeds. So that is all pretty valuable, right? That's a big part of being able to be successful in a war, is having access to the advantage in all those areas. Okay. For the South, I felt like the main area where they had a clear-cut advantage was just military leadership. Their commanding general, Robert E. Lee, was able to find success despite having these disadvantages for much of the war, because he was a better general than the number of generals, commanding generals, that the Union used for a while, because they went through a few of them. Now, when Ulysses S. Grant takes over as commanding general closer to the end of the war, he loses that advantage. The South loses that advantage. But for much of it, they definitely had an advantage in military leadership. We're going to actually look at the generals more as we get later on in this video. I felt like soldiers and weapons seemed pretty even to me. I could see you could make arguments on either of them for the North or the South, depending on how you looked at it. So I don't think it's wrong if you picked one of the sides for that. But yeah, I didn't see a big enough of a difference. And then military strategy, I think you could have put North or South, because I think it kind of depends on your opinion. The South had like three parts to their plan, so I can see you making an argument that they were, more thorough and had a more complex plan and all that. But the North, the reading really mainly focused on the Anaconda plan, so just one aspect. But I think it was a pretty clever plan. So if you really thought that Anaconda plan was clever, I could see you arguing for the North. Okay, but either way, there's just more things that were clear cut an advantage for the North than it was for the South. So that's my opinion, is going into the war, North had the biggest advantage. So again, it kind of then makes you think, well, how did this war take like over 4 years if the North had this big advantage? And that's, again, part of what we're going to see as we study the actual battles and the events and see things play out, like why they weren't able to win quicker than they actually took. Okay, so I'm going to remind you of the way I framed this all yesterday, and I framed it as like a story, right? Imagine as we study the Civil War here, we're watching a movie. And remember, this beginning part is what I refer to as, we could call this the exposition. This is the setup. We're learning the background info and we're learning the characters. And then once the action starts, that's going to help us understand everything. Okay. And today's going to be our last day of the exposition. And I just want to add a couple more characters for you to be aware of. We've already talked some about Abraham Lincoln. He's, of course, a very significant figure. And today I want you guys to look more specifically at the two commanding generals by the end of the war, which was Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. Now, of course, there were so many other very important people in the Civil War that we're just not going to get to because we have limited time. But I at least wanted these three individuals because they're so critical to the war. I want to make sure we have at least some background on them. So let me scroll down Oh, I need to do vocab too. I'm glad I saw that. I almost forgot. So let's talk about vocab real quick, and then I'll come back to the two commanding generals. So you've probably already heard me using these terms, and if you didn't know what they meant, I want to make sure I'm totally clear. Okay, the Union. Union is the portion of the country that remained loyal to the national government during the Civil War. Remember, I said that Union can be another term for United States. So in this case, during the war, this synonym for the Union would be the North, because the North was the part of the country that stayed loyal. So, okay, so when I say Union, I just mean North. And when I say North, I mean Union. All right, and then Confederates is the portion of the country that seceded and formed their own government called the Confederate States of America. And again, the synonym for that would be the South in the war, right? Because all those southern states were consider themselves part of the Confederate States of America. There shouldn't be an S there. Okay, and so I want to also just make sure we remember that, make sure that's really clear. The southern portion of the country seceded. They considered themselves removed from the United States, and they had created their own country. But the North was basically saying, you can't do that. And this, war was partially fought to keep the country together. And of course, also a big part of that was fought over the issue of slavery, because the South wanted to remove themselves and to protect the institution of slavery, and the North didn't want that, basically, right? They didn't want slavery to spread, and eventually they would work to actually abolish slavery altogether. Okay, now let's go back to the two commanding generals. The first one, Robert E. Lee, he was the commanding general for the Confederates for the entire war. And I already mentioned he was a skilled strategist. He was definitely more skilled than the early generals, commanding generals for the North. If you catch me correcting myself whenever I say general, I just want it to be clear. There are numerous generals that are going to be a part of each army at any given time. But then the top general is called the commanding general. So that's why you hear me say that. I don't want you to get confused. Like, for example, when we get to Ulysses S. Grant, he was a general for, I believe, all of the war, if not most of it, but he wasn't the top general. He wasn't the commanding general till pretty close to the end of the war. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up. So Robert E. Lee, commanding general for the Confederates for the entire war. And yeah, like I said, skilled strategist, and they were able to use that as an advantage. Okay, there's a lot more you can learn about him if you choose to focus on him for today's assignment. So I'm going to leave that be for now. And I'm going to scroll down to our last main character, who is Ulysses S. Grant. Like I said, he was a general throughout the war, but he did not become the commanding general for the Union until, the latter part of the war itself. Okay. He was also very skilled and had his own unique traits that made him very successful as a general. But again, I don't want to get into specifics because I want you guys to explore some of that yourselves. Okay. And so with your assignment today, you're going to be choosing either Robert E. Lee or Ulysses S. Grant and doing a little research on them and just learning some more about them. Because again, if we're going to look at how this whole war played out and why the Union was able to win and, all that, and how the country was able to be kept together, then we need to know a bit about these really major characters. Okay. So your assignment is going to do what's called a body bio. And I did an example of one. So I'm going to show you my example, but also explain how it works. You can see everything here. But basically, you're going to pick either Grant or Lee, and you're going to draw a picture of them. Now, I'm doing my example on Abraham Lincoln. Again, I just want to make it clear that does not mean you do it on Lincoln. This is an example. I'm intentionally not doing the two that you can do because I want you to do yours your own way. So don't do it on Lincoln. My example is about Lincoln. And fortunately, again, you can see I'm not a very good artist, so that won't intimidate you guys. You can see that, just do the best you can, and it's okay. But anyway, you have to draw a picture of the person, and then there's three things I want you to look into. I want you to research about them and read a bit about them, and I want you to just figure out what are some of their most notable traits. Okay, that's like personality characteristics, and that is connected. I connected that up to the head. So that part, I drew an arrow from the head to the traits. And then I want you to look into kind of like, what do they care about most? What are they passionate about? What are they interested in, right? That's the heart. So that's why I have an arrow going from the heart to the passions. And then the third thing, right, the feet, the what are they moving? What are they doing is the actions. So draw an arrow from their feet and list, just the most important actions that you were able to find about them. Okay. So I'm going to scroll up here and just touch on how I thought my own assignment through, and then pretty much you'll be working on your assignment. So for Lincoln, right, I just tried to come up with a few of, his most notable traits. These can be good traits or bad traits, right? You might mix a bit. I ended up mostly putting positive traits for Lincoln. That does not mean he was a perfect person. In fact, one of the notable things about Lincoln is that he was not really fully committed to the whole, abolition of slavery, early on in his presidency, and, wavered with some different ideas and stuff. But I couldn't really pin down his flaws to like a single trait characteristic. Also, I did find that a lot of times when he had those, issues, some of his more positive traits helped him to like grow and to work through those aspects of his personality, like that issue I just gave for example. I think he really came around because of his curiosity, because of his courage, and I think because of his compassion. He really grew and challenged himself on that issue, and I think developed into somebody who was much more passionate about fighting for the end of slavery. By the end, you'll see in my event section that he worked hard towards the end of his presidency to get the 13th Amendment passed, which ended slavery in America. So the main traits I found that just, really came up, I've read a biography of him and studied him a little bit, is that he was very curious. He just always wanted to learn and challenge what he knew. He had courage. He was willing to do scary things, hard things. Honest, I think you guys all know Honest Abe, right? He was known for his integrity. Compassionate, to the point where he actually suffered from depression a lot, which, I almost put as a trait, but depression isn't really a characteristic trait. But I think that was a product of his compassion. It made him, he felt things so deeply that he was susceptible to depression. And he was very intelligent. He could really outthink people. In terms of passions, he was very passionate about his wife, Mary Todd. He was an avid reader, so he was very passionate about reading. He loved music, which that was actually not something I was aware of until I did a little more research to do this assignment. And he also was really interested always in new inventions. And then last of all, I just tried to pick like the biggest actions we think of with Lincoln. Obviously, there are tons of them. And if you pick Lee or Grant, there's a lot you could pick. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just try to pick like 2 or 3 biggest ones, okay? And so I picked, he kept the country together through the Civil War. He passed the Emancipation Proclamation, which again, we know didn't actually free any enslaved people, but it did really shift the focus of the war and really made it clear that that was something the Union was fighting for, was to end slavery. And then last of all, was instrumental in getting the 13th Amendment passed, which did actually finally end slavery in the country, okay? So again, just, 2 or 3 really big actions. I think 2 or 3 passions will be fine. You could do 2 or 3 traits. I did more just because ones kept coming to me. I felt like there were so many things he was known for in terms of his personality. And you can certainly do more as well if you want to, okay? But to do that, you are going to have to Google your person and read about them. You might even Google specific things like, what were Ulysses S. Grant's characteristics or traits or whatever. That's fine too. But just make sure you do enough reading that you really feel confident of the information that you found, okay? So this is unique. Normally I'm like, use Discovery Ed. Stop trying to use Google because it's confusing you. Okay, this is one assignment where Discovery Ed doesn't have much, just good biographical info on them. So I actually want you to just go ahead and Google. And it's an opportunity for us to get better at that skill. So, we can do it without getting confused about the information we're reading. So this will be a good chance for me to see how we're doing when we do our own research, okay? All right, the last thing I just want to show you is how you'll attach it, because again, I'm not putting like attaching an assignment for you to complete like normal. You have to do this on paper since you're drawing just like I did. And just like normal, you're gonna have to take a picture of it, okay? So again, you could hold it up to your Chromebook and take a picture with your Chromebook, and then that way it'll just save right onto your Chromebook. However, I think an easier way is just to use your phone and take a picture with your phone. Okay, the only thing is if you take a picture with your phone, you're either gonna have to email it to yourself or upload it to Google Drive on your phone so that you know you can access it to attach to the assignment, okay? I think it's simplest just to send it to Google Drive, okay? Either way, at a certain point, you've done your whole body bio, you've taken a picture of it, and you're going to submit it, okay? This is not a social studies page, but let's just pretend it is just so I can show you. Okay, you're not going to see anything under your work. There's just going to be this add or create button. Okay, you're going to have to click add. And if you've uploaded it to Google Drive, you just click Google Drive and you click on your picture. Okay, if you just saved it to your computer, then you have to go to add or create and you have to click on file and you go to upload. And then you'll be able to browse and see the things saved to your computer, and you should be able to find it that way. Okay, so this is the same kind of way we turned in the Henry Box Brown picture summary. Okay, and if you had trouble with that then you really need to just send me a message and ask questions, because this is a skill we're going to need to get down with, us having digital, all our classes being done digitally for the time being. We need to be able to do this. Okay, that is all I've got. Okay, go ahead and start working on that assignment. Get your picture taken when you're done with it and upload it and attach it to Google Classroom when you are done. Send me a message if you have any questions. All right, have a good day, guys.